basically there are so many theories about why people, get born on this planet or in this universe or name it whatever. So what's your concept of this?
Well, putting everything in the perspective of the being wishing to express, and in the process of expressing, wishing to maintain its integrity, we can understand that perhaps we didn't mean to end up in the situation that we're in today. For example, we didn't mean to end up in a world with global warming, with the ice caps melting, with the air being polluted, with the water being polluted, and so on. We had another idea in mind. Sometimes people think that everything about so-called this world is this way because it's another place than the original place. But I have an alternative suggestion. For example, people, just to explain what I said before, people think this place, this world, is a place of suffering, a horrible, awful, terrible place. And that the other world, the greater world, the world of heaven, and so on, is without all of that. And therefore they come to the problem of having to understand why somebody who was in such a world came to here. This is a typical question. I would like to look at it from another point of view. And that other point of view is the being, ourselves, wishes to express. Being exists, that's a given. So that's not something you have to discuss or question. Now, where that being is located is a question. Yet, I think the answer lies more in how the being is located. In other words, the energy that being has located itself in a certain, that energy which has manifested from the being to cause it to be located in a particular place. We have, let us say, in our natural situation as beings, we have a consciousness, we have our energy, we have our existence. And this existence and this energy and this consciousness is very much connected with the divine, is part of the divine, is connected with other beings who are divine, and so on. Now, that being wishes to express itself, wishes to act, wishes to do things, and so on, and sometimes does that with other persons, other beings. Now, in the process of experiencing, when you connect with others, you are affected by that connection. And being affected by that connection, the way in which you relate or react within these connections is affected by how this external energy impacts upon your being. And when you respond to it, your struggle is to maintain your integrity as a being, so that every expression you make is an expression of being. This is a problem, you see. Now, I'm going to have to explain this in stages because it's not such an easy concept to describe. And I know I've already lost everybody here in this initial explanation. The point is that I, the being, am expressing my being. In a world where I was the only being, that expression would just go out in a frictionless environment, without any restriction, without any conflict, without any barriers, without being slowed down, and without being distorted or changed or added to or in some way manipulated. But I don't live in such an environment. I live in an environment filled with beings. So my expression usually will be an expression in relationship to those beings. Because if they weren't there, what would I express? To whom would I express? And why would I express? When I'm alone in the house, let's say my wife is off doing something, who's there to talk to? What would I say? I wouldn't say anything. No need to. My acts of expression would be more internal. They wouldn't have to manifest in any way. But when other people are involved, my acts of expression are directly connected to those people in one form or another. If they were to ask me how I felt, I would explain how I felt. And that expression, I always wish to be part of that, shall we call, package expression of my being that fulfills my desire to maintain my integrity. That what I say, that what I do, that what I interact with is represents my being and is something that is part of my integrity as a being. Now, considering this, let us say some time ago that I'm living in a place where I'm interacting with others, but over time, the interaction becomes more complex and it becomes more entangled and it becomes more difficult for me to represent my being in that expression, and I'm more and more forced to react to things around me. A child will to a large extent represent its being in its expressions, but as the days go on in a child's life, it will become harder and harder, and by the time the child dies, old man or old woman, the expression will be very, very limited by the body, by the circumstances, by the surroundings, by their age. You can't act like a child when you're old or whatever. The health. So consider that as the primary situation that brings us from this, shall we say, more pristine situation to a more restricted situation. Now you may ask, and this is the proper question to ask, why would I go from a situation which is pristine like that, and why would I enter into one which is not pristine? Well, then I have to question, did I do that or not? Or is it that in my expressions and everything, I kind of got sidelined, or gradually things developed in a way which was not so nice? I'll take an example that the air and the water and the food and everything hundreds of years ago was very nice. But because people thought they were doing it better, the food and air and water quality got worse because they thought they were going to do things better. So while doing it better, actually things got worse. So with all good intentions, people did this. It was all good intentions. They thought it would be easier to farm if you could put fertilizer on it, nitrogen on it, chemical nitrogen. But it burned the land. It caused the foods to have less of a flavor. But they weren't aware of that. And when they became aware of that, they decided they're going to shift from one field to another, do rotation and so on. They kept making adjustments from the original problem. So if we have this idea that perhaps we can make an improvement on our situation, then we can get caught into a web of continuously adjusting the improvements. Now the question would be, is why would somebody desire to do things in a better way? If everything is perfect, this is usually the assumption, everything is perfect somewhere. Why would somebody desire to do something else? And no one can understand why, because it's actually a contradiction in terms. But I see it as that things are fine, but because we're always desiring to do things better, to do things in a more sophisticated way, to express ourselves in a more beautiful way or whatever, or a more creative fashion. So we get entangled, and we move one step in a direction, we get entangled by that. And when we do that, our whole environment around us degrades as a continuous step-by-step building into a situation which we never intended it to be, because it was a constant adjustment of what was. Now, it's my feeling personally that we can undo all of that and make a very nice situation again. And that, in fact, we do periodically. It's like a kind of a shifting periodical thing where you move from the state where everything's fine and then you try to express again and end up in trouble. But that doesn't really grab the essence of the issue. And I suppose I would love to say, I don't know if I can do that. But I see it as the soul wishes to express itself as an individual. This feeling of individuality, this feeling of expressing as an individual, and this feeling of wishing to experience as an individual has led us to come into a situation where to do that we get entangled with other persons and other times, and thus end up in a place where we don't really wish to be. So my answer to the question is, why are we here? And when I said it, how we got here, the answer is basically, we're not here because we chose to be here. We are here because we ended up being here by the way of our endeavor to express ourselves and experience. And in that process of expression and experience, we stumbled upon situations which needed correcting and correcting and correcting and dealing with and adjusting and working out the problems and working out the pains and so on. And it's become what we have today.
Are you saying that being cannot express itself elsewhere?
No, being can definitely express itself in a spiritual world, so to speak. Absolutely. However, at one point, that being may wish to express something in an individualistic way.
So it's not impossible to express itself individually?
It is, but that's usually in relationship with everybody else.
So here it's like the chance for the being to be on its own completely.
Yeah, something like that. That's why in the literatures, at least in the Vedic literatures, something has been discussed about wishing to imitate God, to be the enjoyer or controller. I wouldn't say like that. I would say the desire to manifest an individual existence, not specifically in that package or picture of the spiritual realm, but rather to manifest an individual existence, to chart out an individual experience. And I don't think that's because somebody wishes to be God or wishes to be the controller or wishes to be the enjoyer. It's that they wish to have an individual experience where they themselves chart themselves out. Now, this is a very important point, and here's an interesting point, that why would somebody want to do that? And somebody would want to do that because they think there's something missing there. Now, what would that missing thing be? That they're not developed to their full potential. That there's more to it that they feel. There's like something that being wishes to express itself somehow more. So this coming to this realm is an experience of learning how to express as an individual powerfully, more in tune with one's energy, to expand that energy, expand that consciousness, to expand one's strength and power and all of that. So this idea of developing oneself could be the motivating factor to have left a perfect so-called quote-unquote situation. Situation may be perfect, but one feels that there's more to be. Mm-hmm. There's a greater version of myself to be, that there's something I should expand to. So I don't think it's a question of going back to the exact same situation you were, because that makes no sense. That I was in a perfect situation, I left it, now I'm going to go back to the perfect situation again. That doesn't make sense to me. What makes sense to me is, okay, you're in a great perfect situation, but you feel there's something more. You have to express more, develop more, grow more. And to experience this individuation, to experience this growth, you need to go into a realm where it can be challenged. So you're being challenged as an individual. You're being challenged as an individual amongst other individuals who are similarly challenged. And you are flexing your muscles in exercise and growth, and you develop. And then you get to the point where you feel that you have completed that development. That includes also the balance of the male and female energy, the connection to the Supreme, where you feel confident in the connection because you have actually become, again, that being who you are feeling very good about. Because you formerly felt like that, but that didn't last for some time. So now you feel that way again, you connect again, you're ready. So you can be in any situation you like at that point. You can be in that spiritual realm, you can be here, it wouldn't matter. It's according to your choice. So that is actually, I feel, the reason that people have come here. Now, that previous answer I gave is correct, but it was very dry in the sense that it didn't really grasp the essence of it. That second part question just now, that grasped the essence of it that I was looking for in the beginning. I had to get warmed up.
Okay. Some esoteric writers have this theory that you can develop in the spiritual realm, but it just takes, like, longer or whatever. It's not a question of time, but it's like on the earth, it's like training ground. When you get here to this reality, you can develop faster. Is this
the idea of this realm where we live being a place to develop faster is based upon the concept that we are faced with challenges. Unless you're challenged, you can't really develop. Like, for example, I play guitar, so if I'm playing with my accompaniment machine and it's just churning out a beat and there's these guys who are mechanically playing some chords and stuff, I just play and, I can doodle around. But when there are other human beings involved, and these people are playing their thing, and that we're all communicating and transforming according to each other's changes, it forces me to play better. It forces me to get better. It forces me to understand better. So the interaction is the breeding ground of development. Without interaction, why develop at all? So this interaction is very important. So this realm is a realm of interaction. I don't think the fact that the weather is bad or that the world is going to hell in one way or another is a function of this world. I think it's a function of the way we have created it. What we've done, the choices we've made in this interaction. This world is beautiful as it is. Nature is beautiful. We've screwed it up. And if we could just understand how our being will manifest in doing, maintaining the integrity of being, and if everybody caught on to this mood, everything would change in the world because we would make choices to make it change. Not that it would just like mystically change. We would all make choices to make it change.
okay? If we return to this concept that the being gets, can I say, stuck, like trying to adjust to the situations it gets into in this realm, can the being sort of anticipate this in advance? Is there like a linear time,
Nobody ever gets stuck. There's always a restart. You get rebooted every birth, so to speak. So you never get stuck. There's always moving on somehow or another. I mean, even if you've got a trauma or something, it doesn't last forever. Everything has time limitation on it, and that's good. Most diseases are limited by time. If you look in any really good medical training manual about different diseases, most of them are called self-limiting. At one point, they just burn themselves out. They may leave lousy effects that you don't want to have, but they burn out at one point or another. Some are not. Some kill you. But mainly, they are self-limiting. Otherwise, we'd have a lot more troubles than we did. Now, I think that this realm may get us very entangled, very tightly entangled. It may burn us out. But that's also part of the exercise. That's also part of the, you said training. I don't consider it training. I consider it, shall we say, development of evolution, that the muscles develop. You know, when you're doing exercise, you're not really learning, you're just developing. There's a difference.
If we talk about time, there is this concept of there being only now, this present moment, and at the same time there is this concept of consequences being there for everything we do. How do those two relate?
Um, the present moment is the product of every single thing that has ever happened previous to this moment.
So there is a linear line which goes
That's not linear.
to the future.
That is multidimensional. Every single factor you can think of that has happened up to this moment is affecting this moment right now, is creating it. This moment is a creation of every single anything that has brought us to this moment. So that's not linear. You've got now, 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 now. But you're asking how it relates. Now is a product of all the nows that have had choices made, have had plans made, have had events uh, taking place, have had reactions or stimulus and reaction or whatever. Every single one of these choices, events, by all persons everywhere, have reverberated into a kind of a matrix of this present moment. And at this present moment, I'm making my choice about every single moment to come. You are making your choice. Everyone is making their choice. So we are at every moment creating the moment. And how we create the moment is what we have become through all of the moments in the past. In other words, we're the next version of ourselves. Like if at every moment we got a new version number, of course there would be very big numbers, but this version number, each moment.
Does it mean that we can, edit some things? Like, for example, if there was a traumatic situation, can we sort of like straighten out the effect it had on us and make the next versions of our now be slightly different?
Some people have tried to say that you can actually go back into the past and change the past. I would say that's rather science fiction, maybe quite ideal, perhaps even naive. The only thing you can do is do something now to deal with your situation now. Let's say right now I have a trauma. I'm afraid of knives. Now, I may know that in the past I was cut by a knife. But if I have some kind of a technique where I can deal with that memory, which is including the experience, the pain, and so on, the traumas, it's somewhere in my body. Otherwise, I wouldn't still have it. It may be in a subtle body, mind, or whatever, or somewhere. It's in the subtle realm. It may be in my energy field, sitting somewhere in my aura as a little blip. Or it may just be in my cells, or that all of these things may be actually one thing that I'm just dividing up to talk about. But somewhere in this field of my activities that I call my being, that my being and all those things connected to it, there is this scar. And if I deal with the scar that's there, then I'm preparing another kind of a future. Now, dealing with the scar that's there may mean that I have to remove that connection to my body from that memory to my body. In other words, that the memory is creating an effect on my body, so I have to remove that connection. There are techniques to do that. I have mentioned about EFT. I think that's one of the most incredible things I've ever experienced, that you can remember having some problem, let's say with knives, and do this EFT technique and not have a problem with knives anymore. So by doing this technique, I'm kind of like neutralizing the energetic effect that my trauma had on me and still reverberates within me today. So at the present moment, all I can do is make a choice or do something to deal with the situation I'm in right now. Like I can't look back. I've made mistakes in my life, so I can't look back and just simply lament about those mistakes. Of course I can, but it doesn't help. But I can't really do anything to change then, because then is long gone. But I can change now. And that doesn't mean I can get what I want, but it means I can work towards getting what I want.
Yeah, but I think you cannot change the events which took place, but by changing now, you sort of change your attitude towards the past or your feelings about it. So you are changing the past for yourself.
No, you're just changing the way the past has a grip on you, how the past is holding you, how the past has got you captured. So you've stopped being a prisoner of the past, and you are now an active warrior in the present instead of a prisoner in the past.
Let's talk about this concept that some people don't live in the now. Some of them are prisoners of the past, and some of them live in the future, always planning, always dreaming. How can fix this? I would say, like, how can you help a person become aware of now and stop living somewhere else?
People live in the past because they have a lot to lament about, mistakes they've made, pain they've caused. So if you want to get rid of that particular connection, you have to do something to rectify what you've done. Maybe it means apologizing to people. Maybe it means um, prayer. Maybe it means forgiveness. Maybe it means forgiving yourself. Maybe it means getting forgiveness from someone else. Or maybe it means doing something like EFT and neutralizing it, or some therapy of some kind. But you have to deal with it. When you are lamenting about the past, it's because there's something there you've got to deal with. Now, those who live in the future, they're dreamers. Not everybody does, because I also plan for the future. I have to plan. So I have an idea of what I want to accomplish, so I plan and go step by step to accomplish it. But that's not a dream in that sense that uh, I just think about it, but I never do anything to get there. People who live in the future thinking it's going to be wonderful then, wonderful like that, but they're not actively participating in the present to create that future, they're cheating themselves. So even if you're thinking of the future, which is not necessarily a bad thing, then you have to still understand that without acting in the now, you'll never get to that future. And obviously, you'd rather get to the future that you want to get to. So now make the steps you need to make to get there. And that means being concentrated in the now. Don't think about the future. It's like if you're going to hit a golf ball or a baseball or kick a soccer ball and a football, and when you're making the swing, and then you're looking to where the ball's going to go, and then you miss it completely. You can't look at where the ball's going to go. You got to look at where the ball is now. Keep your eye on the ball. Then it'll get where you want it to go. Same situation with people lamenting about the past. You can't have your consciousness stuck on that event in the past. You have to be here in the now and see how the past is affecting you and neutralize it one way or another.
A totally different thing, sort of. Uh, some I sometimes get this feeling when people, like, they get some new concept, be it a new religion or new pattern of, like, thinking about the reality, they start treating everybody who is not in the same tradition or in the same trail of thought as blind kittens who are in illusion or totally don't miss the point of their living here, and basically, like, this sort of thing, what is reality, what is illusion, how do you how do you see what is which, and what's the concept of illusion? Are there any illusions at all?
That's, I think, too many questions in one question. If we were to divide that question up and we would say, well, first of all, we have the situation where people who've found a new religion or a new way of illumination tend to think anyone who's not in the same situation as them are less fortunate. That's what gives rise to preaching, or gives rise to the giving of mercy, or gives rise to chopping their heads off because they're infidels. Now, um, in one sense, that's of course, how would we say? That's in one sense that's kind of like prejudice, or it's not very evolved. It's fundamentalist, or it's elitist, or something like that. On the other hand, it's actually a very interesting phenomena that everybody goes through in one lifetime or another, or in one way or another. It's kind of a way in which we discover ourselves via some religion or some idea or whatever that we dedicate ourselves to for some time, until we realize that's not the thing for us and we do something else. But we had some moving outside of our stuck patterns. We were picked up and moved aside. So now we see everything from a very unique perspective, and that helps us advance a lot. So I've never been one to say that, oh, look at these fanatical religionists and they're all useless. They should give it up. I may say they may be fanatical, or I'm not interested in what they're doing, but I never say they should give it up, because they're there because they want to be there. Nobody can keep you somewhere you don't want to be. You are exactly where you want to be. In that sense of being in a sect or a religion, or maybe with even not in one. You've chosen to be in that situation. Maybe leaving it is more difficult than you could ever imagine because of social considerations, economic considerations, fear, and so on. But still, you're the one who put yourself there. You can take yourself out. And therefore, I'd like to just inform them that they have the possibility to make any change they want, because they're in charge of their own lives, no matter what anyone says. You may have great authorities telling you that they're in charge of your life, but when you have an accident, you're the one who suffers. Or when you lose your money, you're the one who's lost it. Or when you die, you're the one who dies. Nobody else dies. You're the one alone. And if you're thinking they're responsible for you, they're going to take charge of you, you're in for a big shock, because it's not like you can do whatever you want and you're going to be picked up out of your situation. This is, I think, one of the greatest misunderstandings amongst people who surrender totally to these kind of philosophical systems. Yet, the people who are in such systems are there because they think they're going to get something from them, or they are getting something from them. So right now, it's valuable for them. So they're doing it. So I say, fine. When you get to the time you feel you shouldn't be there anymore, you will not be there anymore. And that's okay. So therefore, I think this idea that of somebody being in a situation and that I should feel somewhat disturbed by it, no, I don't feel like that. But I do think it's ridiculous that people who are in such a situation tend to look down their noses at others who are not. I kind of smile and look at it and say, gee, that's very funny. I don't know if I answered.
So it's not annoying for you, it's just fine?
I mean, if somebody captures me and doesn't let me get out of their preaching to me, or trying to speak to me nicely to save me from my heretical ways, it's annoying, yeah. And then I can't stand it after a while, and I'm going like, geez, leave me alone already. But the fact that people are doing just normally what they do, or even if they tell me about it, or as long as it's not too demanding. Obviously, when things are too much demanding, then you don't like it.
So what about the illusions part?
Yeah, that's a very complex thing. That's why I wanted to divide the question. I mean, what is really illusion? What is really reality? You may pretend that something is some way, like we saw that TV show last night, and the lady was upset with her husband for trying to bring her out of the situation where she would be afraid watching the horror movie. She said, but this is the whole point of it. I'm supposed to be afraid. See, I'm here in this horrible, fearful situation because I wanted to be in, I wanted to feel this. So don't try to save me from it, even though I'm going, ah! This is my choice. Now, if I'm going, ah! And somebody walks in and says, oh my God, I'll save you. And you go, no, that's not the point. And they're like, huh? Because I wanted to be. Ah! Now, I never want to be that way. Therefore, I don't watch horror movies, personally. I watch comedies and stuff like that. I like comedies. A drama, okay. Thriller, all right. But horror movies, no way. But some people like it. Now, you would say, while they're in that situation, they're in illusion. Because the reality is there's no mummy coming out to strangle you or whatever. But you know, I think everything is to a certain extent illusion, if you want to use that as the criteria. One's an illusion that one's life is comfortable. For me, sitting in a comfortable chair, I wouldn't say, now this is the life. I have other things I'd rather do, like create something and being creative, and then, okay, that's really great. So it's like choose your illusion of comfort, choose your illusion of thrills, choose your illusion of, and so the word loses its meaning. For me, it's just experiences. I'm experiencing the horror, even though the horror is not really there. Or maybe I'm experiencing the love, even though the love may not be there. Just because it's not there, what counts to me is the experience of it. Understand? So I don't really care whether it's really there or not. What does really there or not mean? If it's there and I experience it, whether it's really there or not, quote unquote, really there, that's all that counts. For me, the experience. So when I use this word, somebody uses the word illusion, I wonder what that really is supposed to mean. I mean, I know spiritual people who talk about illusion. And I look at them and I'm thinking, but you're in also an illusion, in that same kind of illusion that you've placed yourself in because you think this is really the best way to be. Your situation, my situation, not much different, dressed differently, acting differently some parts of the day. So really, what does it mean, illusion? I mean, what is really illusory? It's just the way you experience it.
Okay, nothing is illusory because whatever you experience is an illusion or reality. You don't really care because that's experience.
No, wait. Let's qualify this that I don't really care. Like, for example, if I think I'm going into a business deal to make $1 million and I end up losing everything, my idea going into the business deal was illusory. You can say that. It was false. I had the wrong idea. I trusted the wrong person. My trust in this person was wrong. It was false. It was an illusion. So yes, there are things which are important to me, which are illusions. But if you were to talk in the archetypical sense of the term, which is what I thought you were talking about, illusion versus reality, that becomes more complex. But there are things which are illusory. There are things which are false. There are things which are not good for me or wrong or whatever. Yes, they exist.
It's just, for example, some people, like their, I don't know, psychic abilities are very developed and they experience something. But then there are people who don't experience such things. So for them, it's not really their experience. So they may either think that what the other person experiences is an illusion because they don't experience the same, or it's real and then they are kind of blind or disabled because they cannot experience the same. Is there a way to like define what's absolute reality, quote unquote?
But even amongst amongst people who are psychic, in this example you gave, If you line up 30 psychic people, but they're not in the same room, you ask them to psychically connect to any particular thing, all the same. You get 30 different impressions of it. You'll get 30 different impressions of you. If you were to go in front of 30 different psychics, you would get 30 different psychic impressions. It's not that psychic, whatever, is an absolute term. It's from the relative point of view of my consciousness. So my consciousness, even though it may have capacities beyond just simply the senses of this body, it doesn't mean we're on an absolute plane here. It's all relative to my consciousness. So psychic, quote unquote, is not an absolute thing. It's my consciousness developing, my consciousness having capacity.
So we basically may say that whatever one is experiencing psychically or
on any level, whatever one is experiencing on any
personal, right?
Yes, it's always from the point of view of my being, looking outwards, from perception outwards, from being. That's part of the doing. The psychic activity is part of the doing. It's just doing not with a physical body, but doing with an energetic body, or doing with a psychic body, or doing with a mental body, or whatever.
So we were talking about these blocks, which are somewhere in our body, and how to remove them. So what techniques can you recommend?
I've spoke many times about this EFT, the Emotional Freedom Technique. You can find it by searching on the internet. They have EMOFree, EMOFREE.com, where you can get all kinds of the information, videos about it, and so on. It's just a very simple technique which allows you to gradually disassemble all of the traumas, disassemble all of the connections you have to events which have impacted you in a way which is distorting your optimal consciousness or your pure consciousness. That's one technique. There are others, of course. There's these various regression hypnosis techniques for the more curious. There are meditative techniques which do all kinds of things. There's yoga practices. There are simply techniques of going off to nature, sitting in the forest, or sometimes some people float in a sensory deprivation tank and have incredible realizations. Long time. Some people sit in a cave for days without any sensual experiences or sensory experiences. There are others who shall we say, go through rebirthing techniques. There's core energetic techniques. There are even prayer techniques. There are techniques of singing in choruses. There's as many techniques as there is the sun. There's Hindu, Christian, Jewish, Muslim, Buddhist techniques. There's techniques galore. Rather, the answer would be what works for you. What works for me, techniques that I recommend to people, first and foremost, is this discipline we talked about. The technique of being conscious and aware of the present and having the discipline to react to a stimulus according to what we are as people, according to our being. Not to be forced to react according to stereotype or according to past history or according to conceptions which are outside of ourselves. That's a discipline. That's a technique. To consciously examine a moment and act according to the being, if you can. That's primary, the first and foremost technique of all techniques. However, there are times when you know you should act in a certain way, but you react in another way because of knee-jerk reaction, kind of like it's a reaction that takes place when your reflexes are just hit in the exact way that makes that reaction because you have a trauma, let's say, or you have a scar from the past. So then the emotional freedom technique is very good for that. But there are many others, and I do that, and also I do this meditation, many forms of meditations. these meditative techniques I have spoken about, recorded a lot of them. Some of them are on the website. The idea being that when you're in this very, very relaxed state, everything opens up to you. So in this meditative technique, the point is to just drop away all of that which is not my being. To drop away tension, anxiety, stress, and so on, that has captured me in some part of my body somewhere, which is then directly impacting or putting a pressure on my being. So by totally relaxing, totally letting go, totally becoming aware of the present, totally becoming aware of our being, then that is probably, after all, the most important of all meditations, simply to relax and let go. And there are so many things to let go of. And when you let go of it all, it's just you and your being. That's the primary, most important technique. And you can do that every time you're in meditation, but then you can also go further and do other things. Like you can look back into your past and find out those things which have disturbed you and X them out. That's kind of a cool technique. You draw a big white X over them and they just fade away. So that you can also keep a list later on of all these events that just came to you, and then use the emotional freedom technique and just tap away all those traumas. You can do that too, combination of the two. There are meditations so that you can understand the energy of others, to feel the energy of others. There are meditations, the I am meditation, I think, is a very fundamental one, where you just realize that you are and just feel your energy flowing in all directions. That's such a way to come in contact with what you are. And then there are the techniques of standing before deities, or standing, or just connecting with your divine deity, and just feeling that connection of energy. There's so many techniques, so many meditative techniques. But I think they fall into these categories of deal with the trauma, relax totally and completely, and just allow yourself to connect. It falls into that category.
I think still the most important and obligatory thing before all those is to realize that you need to deal with all these things.
That's why I talk. If I didn't think that was so, I wouldn't say anything. For me, what my particular technique is when I'm expressing to others is to paint a picture which everybody can look at and understand according to their own eyes, their own point of view, that kind of like makes everybody come to the conclusion that, yeah, things have to change, and yeah, I have to get into this like that, and I have to see the way I am and understand the way I am, and actually live the way I am, live my own life instead of living someone else's, and live right now, live my own life in the now, and let it go in the direction I wish it to go in, and let me be the best person I can be in relationship to all that is around me and all people around me.
Like, why are we here? So do you think that it has nothing to do with the concepts of punishment or self-punishment, or, you know?
I've also spoken about the concept of trying to become good. That sometimes we have this idea that we're bad and that we have to become good. So we may enter into a situation, or we may try to transform into a situation from one that's bad to one that's good. And if we're in one that's good, if we think of ourselves as bad, we may switch into a situation which is not good because of that. I understand that we feel we're not good enough. And that's really the point. Because who thinks they're good? And even if everybody were to say you were good, you would think you're not good enough. You want to be better. So everybody wants to be better because we feel we're not good enough. And this realm is just simply a place where people who feel they're not good enough keep trying to get better. Not everybody and not all the time, but amongst those who are looking towards evolution. So that we are here as punishment, I think, is not really the point. It's a question of we're here because it happens to be a practical facility for those who think they're not good enough to make themselves better or to become better. Punishment is something, it's a very uniquely human concept. Like when an animal eats another animal, we don't think of it as a punishment. We think of it as one getting food. Or even if they're arguing and fighting and one kills another, we think of it as it was a fight. The idea that God would punish us is a very strange concept. It sounds more like a concept you would place upon the devil. Satan, that's a satanic concept, to punish you. Because you would expect Satan to do that. Because Satan's the bad guy, so the bad guys punish you. You wouldn't expect God to punish you. You would expect God to love you. You would expect God to support you. And after all, if you think about it, what did we do that caused us to be punished? And sometimes people say it's all because we tried to be a competitor to God. And just think about that then. Then that means God can't stand the idea of anybody competing with him, because that's usually the conception. He's a God, he's a he. So that God is so envious of anybody trying to compete with him that as soon as you try to any way whatsoever compete, you're just slapped in the face and thrown into this world. That's a very human conception. Why would God feel like that? If God really is God, how can you compete with God? It's not possible. If you think about God as the supreme, how can anybody compete with that? So why would God therefore punish you? Because there is no competition. Your endeavor would have no meaning. So in an endeavor that has no meaning, why would God have to punish you? And what would be the point? This concept of punishment is something that is just stated. There's really no proof to it except for the fact that people feel pain. So they say this is punishment. Well, that's just your mind. You can also say it's a consequence, not necessarily a punishment.
Okay, but if all beings have this feeling of not being good enough, and then they get into this realm to, to get this evolutionary process, why not all human beings want to, to develop, want to have this evolution? Why there are people who don't care?
I think everybody cares. It's just that they manifest it in different ways. I mean, even give me an example of someone who doesn't care, so I can use it as my example.
I don't know, somebody who's totally comfortable on material level and has a happy life.
Yeah, but they got that way. They evolved to that situation. They worked hard. They did things.
They were born in a rich family.
Yeah, okay, but do you think they're happy just being rich and laying around all day? They have to do things.
Yeah, but they're doing things and they're totally satisfied.
I know plenty of rich people. They're not totally satisfied in anything. That's really an illusion.
So you're saying that nobody's
Totally satisfied in everything? No, not by having money or by having fame or anything. Those who are really satisfied are those who are completely absorbed in some kind of trance state.
I don't know, I've seen some people who look quite satisfied to me, like they have their job, for example, and they're totally happy with what they're doing and with their family and with the way of like kind of life they're leading.
Yeah, but even in their home and their family, they're always like putting things on the walls or fixing their furniture or changing it here and there. They want things to be better. They want in their relationship. You know, it doesn't matter how rich you are, how good your job is, you have relationships. And in the relationships, you have problems. You have people you relate to better, people you relate to worse, people you want to relate to better. And there's always this impetus to relate in the proper way. Some are successful, some are not, but everybody wants it. It's not that there's somebody who doesn't want things to get better. The idea of it is absurd. It's just that people think that just because somebody's not doing some kind of obvious external spiritual discipline, that they're not concerned about things getting better or they're not concerned about evolution.
No, but they can be like concerned about getting things better on a very material level. Like they don't.
I would never use the word material or spiritual. I would say in that sense that they're they're not as actively involved in trying to contact their being or to actually express their being. For them, that's not important. They're quite happy with the way in which the body is manifesting its situation. That you can say.
Yeah.
And such persons are less interested in um, their evolution. They're less interested in maximizing their potential as beings. Sure. But that's just where they're at right now. It doesn't mean they're not like that. They were always like that and they always will be like that. But yet there are persons who are gradually, slowly developing. They're just not even ready to ask the question, what to speak of engage in such acts of evolution. The question being, who am I? What should I do here? How should I act?
So you think that evolution is always there?
Evolution is always going on for everybody. It's just some are at beginning stages of it, some are more advanced stages of it. Some are higher in the curve, some are in a more gradual part of the curve, but everybody's always evolving. That you can't avoid.
So and the like ultimate goal is to have this balanced, harmonious being and connection to the deities, to the divine.
I don't even think people know much about the ultimate goal until they're quite close to it. And even if they're at the ultimate goal, they would never really think it's the ultimate goal. It's just that experience they're in. And they would try to avoid saying this is the ultimate because they know, well, I've been going through so many experiences and they just kind of get more interesting. Why should they stick themselves in this ultimate? Because there may be more.